All right, so now we're going to continue preparing for Hajj. MashaAllah. I ask Allah to enable me to go and my family, and for you and your family to go if you haven't gone, and for you to return if you wish to. Ameen. Today, inshaAllah ta'ala, we're going to talk about the recommended acts of the Hajj. And really, we're going to talk about the obligations of Hajj a little bit, and we're going to talk about the recommendations of Hajj. We talked about the obligations of Hajj last week, and you know that the obligations of Hajj, the wajibs of Hajj, are not the integrals of Hajj. But why we need to talk about the wajibs again? Because of the way Abu Shuja presented the information here. Because we're using the text of Abu Shuja for now as as our introduction in preparing for Hajj. We'll see what we do next time. Maybe after we finish reading what we're reading now, maybe we'll read Umdatul Raghib, inshallah, the Hajj section of Umdatul Raghib. So because of the way Abu Shuja arranged his information here, we need to just mention the obligations again. Now, firstly, to remind you, what are the integrals of Hajj? The integrals of Hajj are the ihram. That's the intention that's going to put you into the sanctified status, so that there's things that's haram for you to do until you get out of that state of ihram. And al-wuqufu bi Arafah, being at Arafah for the time that you learned about, yani, that it has a time limit. You only have to be there for a moment, but you have that whole time to get there. Just like the prayer, it's an extended obligation. You need to make it there before the time runs out. And the tawaf around the Kaaba, circling the Kaaba, that's an integral of Hajj. And striding between the two bases of As-Safa and Al-Marwa, that's an integral of Hajj. And according to what Abu Shuja says here, he says an obligation that's not an integral is shaving. But really, shaving is also an integral of Hajj, shaving or trimming, and keeping the order in most of the integrals. So the way Abu Shuja arranged the Hajj chapter, it's very good. It's very useful for a beginner. But he took, according to what's deemed by some of the Shafi'is, some weak sayings. So we're not saying here he's just blatantly wrong. He doesn't know Shafi'i school like that. He's putting things in the wrong places. He's saying some sayings in the Shafi'i school. What we go by is what I'm telling you now. So he said four integrals. Really, there are six. What's missing from here? Shaving or trimming, and keeping the order in most of the integrals. That's six integrals for Hajj. So if you see shaving or trimming after that in another spot, we're not taking that saying. And then, what are the obligations of the Hajj that are not integrals? He said, making the ihram from the miqat, from the specified station. Yes. Throwing the stones at the three stations. Yani. Yes. Throwing at Jamratul Aqaba in particular at one instance, and then throwing at the three stations in their proper place also. So remember that here, Abu Shuja''s statement where he says throwing the stones at 3 stations is a wajib of Hajj. This statement needs to be unraveled a little bit more. There are 3 stations for throwing stones. One of those 3, you're going to throw there in particular. That's going to be one obligation of Hajj. That's called Jamratul Aqaba. That station that's called Jamratul Aqaba. And then all 3 stations uh, in their proper place. All 3 include Jamratul Aqaba. So Jamratul Aqaba has its own throwing status amongst the obligations of Hajj. And he said here, among the obligations of Hajj is shaving. So we're taking the saying that this is not merely an obligation, this is an integral. All right, so now we want to talk about the recommendations of Hajj. And what did Abu Shuja present to us as recommendations of Hajj? We're going to read now and see some of what he counted as recommendations are actually wajibs. They're actually wajibs, obligations of Hajj. And so, yani, so I want to advise you then that make sure you understand this well and not get mixed up here. Because basically we're using a text and now we're not following this text really as it's presented. We have some criticisms for the text here that we're following. So take note of those criticisms so that you won't be confused. قال المؤلف وسنن الحج 7. According to Abu Shuja, there are 7 recommendations for the Hajj. أحدها الإفراد. One of them is called إفراد. وهو تقديم الحج على العمرة. That is performing Hajj before Umrah, as opposed to performing them simultaneously, and as opposed to performing Umrah before Hajj. So your best scenario, your most rewardable scenario is this one. Doing Hajj first and then doing Umrah. بأن يحرم أولا بالحج من ميقاته. This is by a person firstly making the ihram for Hajj from his proper station. ويفرغ منه ثم يخرج من مكة إلى أدنى الحل. Then he completes his Hajj and then he leaves Mecca. Yani he leaves the Haram to outside of the Haram. Even the least bit of being outside of the Haram. And then he makes a new ihram for Umrah and goes back into the Haram to do the worships of Umrah. فيحرم بالعمرة ويأتي بعملها قبل نهاية شهر ذي الحجة. فهذا أفضل من القران والتمتع. ويليه في الأفضلية التمتع بأن يعتمر في أشهر الحج ثم يحج. The second best one for your information is to make Umrah during the months of Hajj and then to do the Hajj after that. ويليه القران. And then the third one, the third ranking procedure is the Qiran بأن يحرم بهما معا, which is for a person to make ihram for both of them simultaneously. وعلى كل من التمتع والقران دم إن لم يكن من حاضر الحرم. وهم من مسكنهم دون مرحلتين من حرم مكة شرفها الله. And in case a person does other than the ifrad, if he does either of the other two, then he has to make some reparation. He has to make some reparation. What's the reparation? That's what is called dam, blood. So I'm going to say probably for now reparation. And then when we get to that section, we'll see it, inshallah ta'ala. But remember, as for the integrals of the Hajj, they are what make up the very Hajj itself. If you don't do them, you're not going to get out of Hajj. You won't have completed it. As for the wajibs, those are obligations that come along with the Hajj. If you don't do them, you're sinful and you have some reparation to take care of. And if you commit a sin, that's one of the things that's particularly forbidden for the pilgrim. If you commit one of the sins that target the pilgrim in particular, then you need to repent and you need to make some reparations. So that's the first recommendation of Hajj there, to do the Hajj first and then to do the Umrah. So that's easy. وَالثَّانِي تَلْبِيَةٌ. The second one is to say the dhikr of the occasion, which is called talbiyah, 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 talbiyah. ويسن الإكثار منها في دوام الإحرام. It's recommended to do this dhikr a lot throughout the ihram. ويرفع الرجل صوته بها. A man raises his voice saying this dhikr. وتسر المرأة بحضرة الرجال الأجانب. And a woman in the presence of eligible men should say it under her voice. وَلَفْظُهَا, the wording of this dhikr is لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك. وإذا فرغ من التلبية ثلاثا صلى على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And it's recommended for someone who's doing this dhikr, if he said it 3 times, then to make salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَسَأَلَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى الْجَنَّةَ وَرِضْوَانَهُ. And then to make dua to Allah Ta'ala for admittance into the garden and for Allah's acceptance. وَاسْتَعَاذَ بِهِ مِنَ النَّارِ. And one seeks refuge with Allah from hell. So that's the second recommendation there. That's easy. First one, to do the Hajj first, then the Umrah. Second one is to do this dhikr. وَالثَّالِثُ طَوَافُ الْقُدُومِ. The third recommendation is the tawaf of arrival. وهو مندوب تحية للبيت لغير متمتع ومكي. This tawaf of arrival, that means you just got to Mecca. So you make tawaf, recommended for you to make tawaf for arrival. It's a recommendation as a salute to the house, as a salute to the holy house. Okay, so that's fine for now. That amount of information right there, that's fine. There's more details there. So take that, and that's easy. So your third recommendation of Hajj is to circle the house when you arrive at the Kaaba, when you arrive at the Haram. I'll remind you, if you circle this, when you circle the house, if you do this tawaf al-qudum, this tawaf of arrival, this will will give you access to, this will permit for you to do sa'i, the striding between the two bases. Because sa'i needs a tawaf before it, even if it's the tawaf of arrival. That's how you might wind up doing sa'i before you do the obligatory tawaf. We talked about that. That's why I'm mentioning it for you. It's possible that you do the sa'i, the striding between the two bases before doing the obligatory tawaf. Because by doing the tawaf of arrival, it will become permissible for you to stride between the two mountains or between the two bases. And I'll remind you also, if you want to understand the chapter of Hajj, then you need to understand the times when things start. Their times are overlapping. All these different activities I'm mentioning to you, they have their own times. So, didn't we say one of the integrals of Hajj is keeping the order in most integrals? That right there tells you some things don't have a necessary sequence. You might do one first, or you might do the other first. So, if it's not very clearly stated for you, do this one first, do this one second, do this one third. If that's not spelled out for you, then this means that for you to understand well, you need to study so that you can get that information down, get it buckled down, and memorize it and understand and say, okay, I got it. Because you need to work your mind on that so that you can understand it. It's not difficult, but might not come to you without studying. What are some of the things we said so far? You can do Hajj and Umrah at the same time, or do Hajj first, or do Umrah first. Your striding between the two bases has to come after a tawaf, but you might have done a recommended tawaf already, and you haven't done the obligatory tawaf. And we said other things. One of the 6 integrals of Hajj is sequence in most of the integrals. Let's continue here. The author says, I hope I didn't make all that more confusing for anyone. But really, this Hajj, if you want to understand the chapter, and if you're not just listening just so you can hear it, maybe that's fine if you want to. But if you want to comprehend it, then it has pieces. You need to latch them properly so you understand it. Now, Abu Shuja' says, وَالرَّابِعُ الْمُبِيتُ بِمُزْدَلِفَةٍ. The 4th recommendation is spending the night at Muzdalifah. It's here. Staying the night at Muzdalifah. Spending the night at Muzdalifah. Laylat al-Nahr. On the night of the Eid. Laylat al-Nahr. Al-Nahr is the sacrificing. Nahr is the piercing of the throats of the sacrifices. The Nahr is the piercing of the throat of the sacrifice. And so the Eid is called Yawmun Nahr, the day of the sacrificing, if you want. It's another thing, if you want to understand the chapter of Hajj, you have to know the names of these days. They say so much in the chapter of Hajj, Yawmun Nahr, the day of Nahr. When do you use this word? Maybe you never use this word except in the chapter of Hajj. But what about if I said the day of Eid? You say, oh yeah, that's familiar. The day of Nahr is the day of Eid. Then there's 3 more days after that, sorry. The days of Tashriq, the 3 days of Tashriq. When is the night of Eid? So it should be clear for you by now if you've been listening from the first sessions. You know that Arafah starts on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, after the zenith. And it goes all the way until Fajr time. So that means the time of Arafah starts at Dhuhr time and goes into Asr time. This is the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. Then the sun goes down. That means the 9th is over and the 10th comes in. It's Maghrib time. That's the Eid, the day of Nahr, which starts at nighttime because the night comes before the day. So that's the night of An-Nahr, the night of the Eid. That's time for being at Arafah, Maghrib time, and then Isha time, and until the end of Isha, When Fajr comes in, the time of Arafah is over. So the fourth recommendation, according to Abu Shuja', is spending the night at Muzdalifah on the night of the sacrifice. والمراد به كونه في أرض مزدلفة بعد منتصف ليلة النحر ولو لحظة. What's meant here is for the pilgrim to be in the land of Muzdalifah after midnight. What's midnight? Not 12 o'clock. Midnight is halfway between Maghrib and Fajr. What time does Maghrib come in? What time does Fajr come in? How many hours are those? Divide that in half. That middle number is the midnight. Even if one were there for only a moment in that land of Muzdalifah after the midnight. وعده من السنن هو ما يقتضيه كلام الرافعي. And for Abu Shuja' to count this as a recommendation, that's based on what is taken from the words of Al-Rafi'i, as opposed to An-Nawawi. Al-Rafi'i and An-Nawawi are the sheikhs of the Shafi'is. They're at the third level. A Shafi'i is the first level. The Mujtahids under him are the second level. An-Nawawi and Al-Rafi'i are at the third level. So Abu Shuja', it's like he goes the way Al-Rafi'i goes. وَالْأَظْهَرُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ النَّوَوِي أَنَّهُ وَاجِبٌ. And what complies with the documentation of Ash-Shafi'i himself, which is the way An-Nawawi went, is that spending the night at Muzdalifah is an obligation. So really goes up here. He said Hajj has 3 obligations. He counted making ihram from the miqat, that's 1. Throwing the stones at the stations, that's 2, although that's detailed right there. He said shaving, really shaving doesn't go there. Shaving goes under the integrals. But staying at Muzdalifah goes here. That's an obligation. فَفِي تَرْكِهِ دَمْ. So according to saying that spending the night at Muzdalifah is an obligation, if you don't do it, then you have to make some reparation. You have to make some reparation for missing an obligation. But if you take the saying that it's just sunnah and it's not obligatory, then you wouldn't have to make any reparation for not doing it. What are those reparations? We didn't get there yet. وَالْخَامِسُ رَكَعَةَ الطَّوَافِ. The 5th is 2 rak'ats of tawaf. 2 rak'ats of tawaf. بعد الفراغ منه. After you finish making tawaf. Make tawaf and then pray 2 rak'ats. والأحسن أن يصليها خلف مقام إبراهيم عليه الصلاة والسلام. And the best is to pray those 2 rak'ats behind the prayer station of Abraham. That spot that's called Maqam Ibrahim. It's known there. وَإِلَّا فَفِي الْحِجْرِ. If one's unable, then for him to pray inside the hijr, within the hijr. That spot's known too. وَإِلَّا فَفِي الْمَسْجِدِ. And if one's unable to pray there, then to pray somewhere, those 2 rak'ats inside Al-Masjidul Haram. وإلا ففي أي موضع شاء من الحرم وغيره. And if he can't pray there, then he can pray anywhere in the haram he wants to, or somewhere else. ويسر بالقراءة فيها نهارا ويجهر ليلا. When one prays those 2 rak'ats, if it's the daytime, he recites low, and if it's nighttime, he recites aloud. Abu Shuja' says, وَالسَّادِسُ الْمُبِيتُ بِمِنَا. Yani, the explainer of Abu Shuja' says, وَالسَّادِسُ الْمُبِيتُ بِمِنَا. The 6th recommendation is spending the night at Mina. لَيَالِيَ التَّشْرِيقِ الثَّلَاثَةِ. Doing that for the 3 days or the 3 nights of Tashriq. So, the first night, we have 4 nights in mind here. The first night is the night of An-Nahr, which is the night of Eid. And then you have 3 more nights after that, the nights of the 3 days of Tashriq. 4 nights. So the first of those, which is the Eid night, you're going to stay at Muzdalifah. And then the other 3 nights, you're going to stay at Mina. لكن إن نفر من منى قبل مغيب شمس اليوم الثاني من أيام التشريق سقط مبيت الليلة الثالثة ورمي يومها. However, if the person leaves Mina before Maghrib, so he did the first day of Tashriq, spent the night, the first night of Tashriq at Mina, and then the next day is the first day of Tashriq. Then the night comes in, that's the second night of Tashriq. And then the day comes in, that's the second day. If you leave before Maghrib comes in, then that third day is dropped for you. It's permissible for you to do so. وعد المصنف هذا المبيت سنة. Abu Shuja counts this staying at Mina as a recommendation. على ما صححه الرافعي, according to what al-Rafi'i deemed correct. لكن صحح النووي في زيادة الروضة الوجوب. However, النووي deems staying the night, deems staying the night at Mina an obligation. So then, if it's an obligation, goes up here. So Abu Shuja said Hajj has 3 obligations. The first one is making the ihram from the specified station. Second one is throwing the stones. He said the third one is shaving, but we're not taking that saying. Shaving goes up into the integrals. So the third one's going to be staying the night at Muzdalifah. And then there's a fourth one, so not just 3, but 4. A fourth one, which is staying the night at Mina. This is the only thing about the chapter of Hajj in the text of Abu Shuja that when I was just studying in the beginning, gave me run for my money, trying to understand these things. Because it's, according to the way An-Nawawi went, this is disordered. It's out of order. So it's going to be challenging maybe if you're charged with studying this text, memorizing this text verbatim, not changing its words. But then you're going to have to remember that, but when you said this, it's not like that. And when you said this, it's not like that. And when you said this, it's not like that. And then what's the 7th one? He says, وَالسَّابِعُ طَوَافُ الْوَدَاعِ. The 7th recommendation is the farewell tawaf. عند إرادة الخروج من مكة لسفر. When you want to leave Mecca to travel, حاجا كان أو لا, whether you were a pilgrim or not a pilgrim, even if you weren't a pilgrim, but you were in Mecca and you wanted to leave to travel, then sunnah for you not to leave without making tawaf. طويلا كان السفر أو قصيرا, whether that's a long journey or a short one. ولا يجب على حائض ولا نفساء. And this is not obligatory on a menstruating woman or postpartum bleeding woman. ولا وداع على من خرج لغير منزله في سفر قصير بقصد الرجوع إلى مكة لفعله. وما ذكره المصنف من سنيته قول مرجوح. And what the author Abu Shuja', may Allah have mercy on him, has mentioned here, that this farewell tawaf is a recommendation, is an outweighed position. وَبِنَاءً عَلَيْهِ يُنْدَبُ فِي حَقِّهِ الدَّمْ إِنْ تَرَكَهُ وَالْأَظْهَرُ وُجُوبُهُ. But what is most in compliance with the documentations of Ash-Shafi'i himself, rahimahullah, is that this farewell tawaf is obligatory. Obligatory. But here, obligatory doesn't mean obligatory for the sake of the Hajj. Rather, it's just an obligation, even if you weren't a pilgrim. The strong saying is that if you're in Mecca, you're not menstruating, you're not postpartum bleeding woman, and you want to travel out of Mecca, whether you're a pilgrim or you're not a pilgrim, this part's not what matters here. Then the strong saying is it's obligatory to make tawaf around the Kaaba before you go on your trip. If you were to ask why, the answer is because the Prophet said so, alayhi salatu wasalam. There's a hadith about that. The hadith has in it a command, and a command is proof for an obligation, unless there's another proof to prove that the command is for something else. So because there's a hadith with a command to make this farewell tawaf, as Shafi'i says, this tawaf is obligatory, not merely recommendation. فَإِن تَرَكَهُ عَصَى. So according to that saying, anyone who doesn't do it has sinned. And there's some details I'm skipping for you here. And then the author says, وَيَتَجَرَّدُ الرَّجُلُ أَيْ الذَّكَرُ وُجُوبًا عِنْدَ إِرَادَةِ الْإِحْرَامِ عَنِ الْمَخِيطِ. And a man, meaning a male, is obligated when he wants to enter into the state of ihram to strip out of his stitched clothing, to strip out of his stitched clothing. Now, to take off his stitched clothing, or what's like that, or what's like the stitched clothing. Like, what if you were wearing clothing made of metal links? Your clothing's made of metal links. Then you have to take that off too. Or what if your clothing is made out of what do you call that? You know, the fez that goes on the head. You know, like the red fez, that compressed material. So what if you had a shirt like that and some pants like that? You walk around looking like you're stiff as a board because your shirt is compressed material and your pants is compressed material. Also, this one, you have to take it off for the state of ihram. The man. وَيَلْبَسُ نَدْبًا إِزَارًا وَرِدَاءً أَبْيَضَيْنِ جَدِيدَيْنِ. And then it's recommended for that man to wear an izar, that's a waistcloth. I'm going to call izar waistcloth, not loincloth, waistcloth. What's meant by izar is what covers what's between the navel and the knees. And the shawl is what goes over the shoulders and around the chest. So it will be recommended for the man to get out of, he's obligated to get out of such clothing that was described to you, and then recommended for him to wear an izar and a shawl, a white izar and a white shawl. Recommended for them to be new, and if they're not new, then at least for them to be clean. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there. And then inshallah, next we'll read about the prohibitions while in the state of ihram. Do you have any question I can answer for you? Barakallahu feek. May Allah Ta'ala reward you for your consistency. Don't forget, when you attend these lessons that we're giving here on Hajj, don't forget to correct your intention, because maybe the Muslims, maybe the communal obligation about this case is not fulfilled, because so few Muslims know how to do Hajj and Zakat. Question, could you please repeat the name of what men should remove? They should remove their stitched clothing. You know, stitch, like, has stitches in it, like means sewing in it. How's your sleeve attached to the torso of your shirt? You have two sleeves. How those sleeves are not falling on the ground? Because it's stitched on. right? So stitched clothing, or even the part that goes over your torso, your chest. Why doesn't it just fall apart and fall on the ground? Because it has stitching in it.
Started.
Wa alaikum salam. 1 second, please. So the man has to remove his stitched clothing, and then he replaces that with, he puts an izar, yani a wrap. He puts a wrap around his waist, and he puts a wrap around his chest and shoulders. Wa alaikum salam. Yes, go ahead, please.
Because I know some of these stars in the state, they are stitched on the side, and they may have
Yeah,
a
he's not
draw.
gonna wear that. Not that.
So
Let him take the stitching out.
I got it.
Yeah,
Thank
you're welcome. So what you're gonna basically do is just get like something that's long and you put it around your waist and wrap it in a good way. And those, by the way, there's something that some people call izar. Maybe it's izar. I don't know, but it has drawstring, has a drawstring, and has a pocket. And then when you pull the drawstring, since it's tight there where you pull the drawstring, kind of looks like has skirt on. This, not this also for Hajj, but also this is maybe just an American thing, like because Americans like convenience, so they made something with a drawstring and a pocket. The izar usually is very wide, like as far as you can put your arms to the side. You're going to be holding your izar. Pull your arms out to the side, and then your izar is going to be in one hand, one end of your izar, the other end of your izar is going to be in the other hand, and you're inside. Now, I'm not talking about being in a state of ihram, I'm just talking about an izar. And then you're gonna, with your right hand, for example, pull that side over your front, and then your left hand pull that one over, and then roll it down, for example. So to give you an idea that izar usually is going to be wide, not like something you need to step into like it's a skirt. It's very narrow. And you might have izar is not closed at all. It's like basically just a shawl itself. You wrapped it around your waist. Question: where can we find maps for Hajj and how to put things in order? Uh, Someone sent me something and I never opened it. He sent it to me, told me there's diagrams in there, and I didn't take the chance to open it and look at it. That's one thing. Two, I had something that I drew out very nice, but it's in the book that I have told its tale several times. That this book is lost. I never found it. I looked for it so much. I have two books that I lost in particular. I have other books I lost, but two that I lost, mashallah. It has very nice stuff in there. Question: can someone put a waist belt on the top of the izar? Let me ask. I heard an answer, but I just want to ask anyway. Any question? Any other questions? Barakallahu fikum. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك